Hi, this is Mike from MDXpods. I just wanted to welcome you guys to the first episode of Remake Rewind. This is the premiere episode, so think of it as a series premiere. It's going to be a little bit longer than our regular episodes, so bear with us. Thank you for listening. And also, thank you to Patrick Garza, our first patron on Patreon. He's contributing $5 a month, and it really helps us out. Now on with the show. Hello, thank you for listening to episode 1 of Remake Rewind by MDXpods. I am Mike. With me is Xavier. How are you doing, Xavier?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
And we got Dustin in San Francisco. How are you doing, Dustin?
Hey, doing great.
Awesome. So in this first episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the two different franchises for Godzilla. We're going to decide if they should have been remade. We're going to go over some remake reboot news. And then we're going to thank our patrons and tell you where you can follow us. So I was thinking, going through, we should kind of come up with some criteria for the movies, how we're going to decide how good they are, should have been remade, what makes a Godzilla movie. So what do you guys think are some things we should talk about?
Well, I absolutely think that deciding what makes a Godzilla movie is important because, I mean, obviously they share the same name. They're all about giant lizards.
A Godzilla movie, for me at least, is it's like that whole guy in a rubber suit stomping around thrashing a model set, you know, and having like this creature have a presence on the screen that is undeniable, you know. Like Godzilla is really, at least for me, Godzilla movies, like Godzilla is a force of nature in these movies.
Absolutely.
Well, so there's something I agree with and disagree with that you just said, Dustin. On the one hand, yeah, I think it's important to have like this giant force of nature, but at the same time, I mean, Godzilla is representative of something more than just a guy in a rubber suit. Right?
You're talking about a theme, so we should talk about the theme of the movies.
Yeah, there's themes in Godzilla movies.
Sure. I mean, thematically, you have like the whole like fear of atomic weapons and, you know, folly of mankind and all that stuff. And I think that's important too.
Okay.
And I think the different movies address it in very different ways, especially these 4 that we're talking about.
The other thing I want to talk about is one of the complaints of Godzilla movies is he's not in it for very long, which makes sense, actually. So most of the movie is that human element. So I want to talk about how society is, how the main characters are, and do they add something to it, or is the movie just boring when Godzilla's not around?
Oh, this is going to be great when we're talking about the 98 Godzilla.
Oh my god.
So I think we got our criteria. The human element, the theme, and the creature themselves. So how does that sound?
Yeah, cool.
That seems like a pretty fair way to rate things.
All right, perfect. So we're going to start with, I think, the American franchise. So, of course, the 1998 Roland Emmerich fantastic film.
Oh, God.
Starring Matthew Broderick, a couple Simpsons actors in there, Jean Reno, and then we'll go into...
Oh, wait, hang on. We cannot forget that there is one Asian guy right at the very beginning in the fishing boat who was also in Die Hard. That's a very important thing.
That's very important.
It's critical.
And then, of course, the 2014 Garth Edwards, Bryan Cranston, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Godzilla. So let's just get into it. Do you guys want to talk about the creature design first?
Oh, I would love to talk about creature design. That's like my bread and butter. I've always loved the 98 Godzilla design. I think it is absolutely not Godzilla. It's just a giant weird
big lizard.
Yeah, it's a big lizard dinosaur thing.
What's really interesting is Toho Studios allowed a different company to use this for the first time with that 1998 Godzilla movie. And they had this like 72-page document about what can and cannot be done, how many toes it has, the geometric ratio of the spines on the back, all these different things. And Stan Winston actually came up with the design, which I'd like you to chime in on with your background.
Oh my god! So a little bit of background on me. I work in the game industry as a character artist for video games. I make the 3D models that you would see of guys running around in a game, and I love creatures. I love monsters. I love especially masks and special effects makeup. And Stan Winston is he's the master at it. He's absolutely the best. And, you look at the pictures of that Godzilla that he came up with, and it's not only super, super tied in with the original design and super faithful to it, but it also updates it, and it brings in all these design elements from things like the Jurassic Park movies with their designs for their dinosaurs, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I love it so much.
And then it is not what made it into this movie.
No, not at all.
So, a little bit of background. So Roland Emmerich directed this film. He did, of course, Independence Day. He did 2012, all those like disaster movies, right? So, yeah. So when he took over, he went to Sony and Columbia TriStar and was like, no, I'm going to do what I want. I want total creative freedom, which is something you're going to give to a guy who just did Independence Day, which was one of the biggest movies at that time. So he decided that he thought the Godzilla design was dumb and hokey, and he just wanted a giant amphibious lizard. At one point, he was going to have it camouflaged, where it was going to be like gray and blue and can change colors and stuff. But at that point...
What did you say about a couple of things there, dude. So this guy, hot off of Independence Day, must have seen these designs from Stan Winston, master creator, right? Like, we can all agree this guy's amazing.
Terminator.
The images of this version of Godzilla are amazing. It's like, no, not for me. I'm not gonna do that. You guys all go to hell. We're gonna make a giant lizard. Great.
Yeah. So I think we all agree that the design on this one has something to be desired. A couple other things I wanted to kind of talk about is, in the movie itself, the size is pretty consistent, but while doing research for this episode, it was really inconsistent in trailers, promo materials, and stuff like that. Like, they could not get the scale of this creature correct.
Is it consistent in the movie? Like, there are times where, like, it's like, okay, it's huge and stomping around the city, and then it'll be like in a subway tunnel, and it'll be able to like move around, or in a sewer tunnel and be able to like walk around in there. But then there's times where like the tunnel gets too narrow for the Godzilla to catch him.
Yeah, so that's one of those interesting things. You know how towards the end of the movie, everybody's in that like taxi cab, and Godzilla lifts them up in the taxi cab, and Godzilla's just like crushing this cab in its mouth
with the asphalt underneath them.
Well, yeah, and clearly its head is larger than a car, but then when you watch other parts of the movie, like right before the scene where it goes and eats all the fish, and
Matthew Broderick looked about the size of his snout.
Yeah, exactly. It looks tight. Like he dwarfs everything around him, but then in that scene, it's just like his head's a little bit bigger.
Also, when his head's coming through the dock.
Oh yeah,
at the beginning.
Well, yeah, and then they also, like, doesn't at one point Matthew Broderick, when he's, like, studying his worms or whatever, says that the worms are 17% bigger after the radiation exposure.
Yeah. So, like, what exactly was the thing that this thing is 17% larger than?
Are we to believe that? Like, I don't know what that's for.
The worms were in Chernobyl, where the Godzilla came from was, like, the Bikini Islands with all the nuclear tests, so he maybe got bombarded a lot more. Maybe that's it, but it's a Roland Emmerich film.
I think the perfect way to describe the entire thing, it's just a Roland Emmerich film.
The one thing I can't say,
I feel like those worms could have been in the ground being mutant worms for like a long time, right? Like since the Chernobyl thing. Mm-hmm. But like if this was happening during the atomic testing in the 40s in the Bikini Islands or atoll or whatever, like, how long does it take for a marine iguana to turn into a Godzilla? What's been going on, and why now?
Really makes sense, because they're like, this is a new species. It's like they would have heard about it way earlier. Like, where was it?
It's a new species 50 years later. Yeah, like, it's crazy.
Yeah. The one thing I can say it did do really well was when you saw its like face and stuff, it looked lame. But they did a lot of stuff to build the tension. Like, even though it's only about 2 minutes more than regular Godzilla movies, in terms of like overall Godzilla amount, anytime you just saw his legs or his feet or his claw, I was surprised how well the special effects stood up.
Well, I think that's one of the saving graces of the 98 Godzilla is despite the fact that it's a hokey story and it has terrible acting and it's really just a dumb fucking movie, the special effects still hold up. Almost 20 years later?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the hugest fan of the design, but I was kind of a kid when it came out, and I'm honestly still a fan of it because it just looks like a giant fucking dinosaur, and giant fucking dinosaurs are fucking cool.
But then the movie should have been called Giant Fucking Dinosaur. It shouldn't have been called
but then I don't think Roland Emmerich is going to direct a movie called Giant Fucking Dinosaur.
I would go see a movie called Giant Fucking Dinosaur directed by Roland Emmerich in a heartbeat.
Oh, right? Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All right. So I think we're good here. Let's move to the theme, which I think this one did not have.
No.
No, I think we just discussed the theme. It was giant fucking dinosaur.
Well, yeah. So this Godzilla behaves like an animal. It's just an animal. Like all it does is want to eat fish and make more of itself. Like it has no I guess that's my biggest problem with it is this arrival of Godzilla signifies nothing. There's no... It's
not a changing of the times.
There's nothing. This is not a god risen out of, some, need to protect the Earth or at least defeat another monster or really accomplish any task or destroy mankind. And also, I really don't understand why it selects New York City as the place to, make a home, really, and raise a family.
And how did they get there coming from the Pacific Ocean?
No, exactly. It makes no sense, dude.
He went through the Panama Canal?
It must have.
The Panama Canal is pretty large. I mean, maybe he just kind of snuck in a little.
All the way around India, all the way around Africa.
Well, okay, so
I want to say they actually discussed this in the movie, though, didn't they? Because they showed the path across the globe that Godzilla took.
They do.
But it's at the most narrow point aside from the Panama Canal. They're in their helicopters and they're looking with their binoculars and they're like, gee, where's that giant 500-foot long dinosaur that's stomping along this jungle area? I wonder where it could be.
It starts with, where is the Japanese ship, at the beginning of the movie?
It was in the Sea of Japan, I think it said.
Because that ship, I'm assuming it's that ship, right, that's all ripped up by Godzilla, they find washed ashore in Jamaica.
Was it in Jamaica that they were?
It says Jamaica.
Oh shit!
So did Godzilla take it with him? Did he bring it there? I don't
actually, now that we're discussing geography, I want to come back to this point when we start discussing the 2014 Godzilla because there's a really important point in there about the geography of the Bay Area, and I want to get that out there.
So I'm down.
I think the theme we agree there was none. So. I want to talk about now the human element, which I actually will talk about when we get into the 2014 one. But I think 1998 has an edge here for a couple reasons.
Continue.
Every character, in my opinion, played a role. Matthew Broderick was that sane person. He's an animal. He's mating. He finds out it's pregnant. Even the girlfriend had something to where she was able to get into the news network and broadcast live and say, "Hey, military." Nuke, or not nuke, but destroy Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And of course the French Secret Service paramilitary guys, they all had their role.
For being as kind of hokey and corny a movie as it is, I really think that even though it's really bad, it does have a fairly tight script considering that there isn't a lot of fluff in there, which I find kind of surprising actually, given how kind of shitty and hokey it is. I mean, am I wrong?
No. What do you think, Dustin?
I don't know, man. Okay, so the woman, Audrey, his girlfriend, his college sweetie, as we're told in the movie. So this woman has been trying to make a career for herself, doing her whole thing. And it's revealed that she's basically ghosted this dude for the last 8 years. And then as soon as he sees her, he wants to make her a cup of tea. And catch up. And he does this, and then she immediately steals the tapes and goes, she's terrible, and he's a loser.
You're right, but that makes them a character.
Oh no, they're characters. I just hate them both.
Oh yeah. I absolutely agree with Dustin on this one. They are both terrible human beings in their own respective ways.
And I'm waiting this whole movie, so all of this is happening, and I just want Godzilla to fucking eat him, and it doesn't happen. I'm really disappointed.
Well, that's part of the 72-page document. Godzilla can kill them in vehicles, smash tanks, destroy helicopters, but Godzilla cannot eat people.
Or crush a person. I don't know, end their life is all I wanted.
See, actually, that's one of the things that I find astonishing that Roland Emmerich kept that one little aspect, and then it just trashed the entire rest of what makes Godzilla Godzilla.
Honestly, what I think it is with Godzilla movies, I've found that as I watch them, the character I want to identify most with is Godzilla. Like, is unleashing the destructive might that a Godzilla has, and it just doesn't really happen in this movie. Like, it's not what that creature does.
So with that being said, I think we'll move into 2014 Godzilla.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
let's do it.
Let's talk some themes.
So I think Dustin hit this one on the head earlier when you were saying force of nature. I think that was what was really pounded over and over again in this one. What do you think, man?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing is like, the awakening of Godzilla, it is for a reason, like that, in this movie, it looks like Godzilla is there to basically be the king of the monsters and protect Earth from other monsters, was kind of my takeaway from it.
Absolutely.
And I thought that
let them fight.
That's what works for me.
I would add that, like, there's a slight wrinkle in that it doesn't just seem like he's the king of the monsters. It also seems like he is there to somehow restore balance. Not just be the king, but restore balance. Because it seems like when when they were digging in those mine shafts and stuff, and they found those ancient cocoons, they woke some shit up, dude. Oh crap! Oh, bad things are happening, and suddenly that unbalances the nature of everything in the world.
Like, there's an equilibrium that Godzilla kind of preserves.
Yeah.
Probably for the Earth for all time. Like, I don't know. It seems like ancient and scary, and I thought it was really cool. I thought it was way more consistent with what a Godzilla movie is.
Yeah, and it actually starts to remind me of stuff like Eldritch Abominations and shit from H.P. Lovecraft in some ways.
Yeah, and you also get a sense, like, by the end of the movie, when, Godzilla's done his thing, like, that Godzilla will go probably return to some kind of slumber, until needed again. Like, it's cool, and like, it's sort of like mythological, I guess. I don't know. I enjoyed it very much.
One of the things I thought was interesting is when they're in the Pacific Ocean and all the aircraft carriers are going, and Godzilla just swims by them like they're not even there.
Like, I loved that.
The humans are of no consequence to Godzilla.
Same thing at the Golden Gate Bridge when they're like shooting at him with tanks. He just walks through the bridge. He doesn't squash them. He just walks.
Man. I think that's actually great because it shows that he just absolutely doesn't care. Like humans are simply, they're nothing. It's like they're like bugs to him, and I think that's fucking cool.
It sort of implies too that, like, this version of Godzilla, presumably could have been around before humanity was on the Earth, like these creatures that have built these cities and stuff, like the cities don't matter. None of it matters, like in the 98 one, like you got Godzilla kind of tiptoeing through the streets and, bebopping around getting chased by helicopters. And this one, like, Godzilla just walks through buildings. Like, they don't matter. They're just in the way.
I thought that too, but there's actually points where it looks like you never see Godzilla make contact with the building. Unless he's
you see him make contact with a bridge.
He did make contact
with
a bridge, but that was in the way.
Well, actually, now that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about before, but I must have like subconsciously noticed it. The Mutos that he's fighting, they actually do just smash through buildings and stuff. When one of them's flying, its wingtip just like crashes through one of the skyscrapers, and it just doesn't seem like it made a difference, but Godzilla never actually does that unless he's fighting one of them, and even then, it seems like it's almost just like a secondary thing that accidentally happened. Yeah, just collateral damage.
Yeah, they're like the point is not to destroy the city, but it's also not to not destroy the city.
Yeah.
Like the structures that people have built are just fixtures of the landscape. They don't really matter.
Yeah, it's almost like a tree or a rock. Exactly.
Yeah, it's just there. Like, oh, if I can grab this monster and smash it into this building, that's fine. That'll work. It'll probably hurt it, Like, It's cool.
All right.
I think that's way more consistent with the Godzilla.
I think so too. So I think this theme was just, when it comes down to it, like even with current events, looking at all the flooding going on in San Jose and everything like that with all the rains, is no matter how advanced as a species we get, nature's always going to put us back in our place, I think is the theme. At least that's how I interpret it.
And you get a lot of shots, like, when you're looking at Godzilla, like, a lot of them are from, like, the ground or, like,
The
from a
scale is
person's
huge.
perspective. Yeah. And it's, like, framed with, like, objects kind of, like, in the foreground, or, like, closing doors or, stuff like that, like, as you get a glimpse of it. Or when you're looking out through, like, the airport windows and you're seeing them, like, size each other up and you see these, like, giant feet and legs and all that. Like, just the scope of it,
Yeah, that's something
it just seems much larger.
You know what I thought was funny? When he's getting to Hawaii, where we really see him for the first time, that he makes that tsunami, which kills hundreds of people.
Oh, it must. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But guess what? It doesn't kill the dog.
Oh, no, of course. Actually, that's a really good point, and something that you can tie in with Roland Emmerich movies, specifically.
Independence Day, the fireball.
Oh, yeah, the fireball, when it just blows up. What was it?
It was going through a tunnel.
Yeah, it was going through the tunnel. Yeah, and there's just this, like, wall of fire, but the dog just barely makes it through that doorway and survives. Anyway, back to the topic at hand.
So I think we're good on the theme that it's nature. The thing that bothered me most about this movie, and this is something that Dustin and I argued about a lot a couple years ago when this movie came out, the people. I did not give a shit about anybody other than Bryan Cranston.
I kind of have to agree. My problem is that I really liked Bryan Cranston's energy and acting, but his character did absolutely nothing for me because there wasn't really anything there.
There wasn't enough.
I had no way to really get invested in his character because as soon as I started to get invested, he's dead.
Yeah. So then we're stuck with Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I like in Kick-Ass. He was in that movie where he plays John Lennon, which was good. He played Quicksilver, and Quicksilver wasn't in Avengers very long. But he had a good arc with a little bit of screen time. He was a fully fleshed character.
Yeah, he had a bit of range.
But in this movie, he did nothing. He was boring. The one job he had was to be the bomb guy, and he couldn't defuse the bomb, and it blows up just outside of San Francisco.
Well, to be fair, the casing for the bomb had gotten all fucked up.
It did.
I see where you're coming from, because at that point, they could have either used the bomb or defused the bomb, and it wouldn't have actually made a difference on the story.
And that's what my big point is, I guess, is that ultimately, the people that we saw in the movie had no consequence to what happened in the movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson didn't help defeat anything. He could have not been in the movie, because the soldiers still found the little lair of the eggs and just blew it up. And that's another thing that bugged me in the movie. Like, I actually liked in the 1998 one, where that finding the nest of Godzillas was a huge thing, and it's like, there's like 200 of these things. It's a big deal. We need to kill them all. In this one, it's just like, grenade. And
but there's only actually one thing that he did in the story, and that is that he opened up the valve thing on the gas truck in the lair with all the eggs and blew them all up, and then it pissed off the mama creature and whatever. But really, yeah, you're right. He didn't make a difference in the storyline. And really, none of the other characters did.
Elizabeth Olsen, who's great, she did nothing. She stayed behind in the hospital for some reason, didn't save anybody, didn't do anything, didn't distract any monsters. I feel like she probably had a bigger scene that got cut. But realistically, Elizabeth Olsen could have not been in the movie. He could have been a single father, and it would not have changed the movie at all.
So part of what I agree with all that stuff. These characters are really of no consequence. But I think the larger thing with this movie is, like, there's really nothing you can do. Like, nobody's going to turn the tide of this single-handedly. And I think when, like, the Japanese doctor guy sums it up, where he's like, you let them fight. Like, you have to just ride this out. There's nothing we're going to do to change the outcome of this. Like, try to get people out of there the best you can. But, like, this is going to run its course. This is like, oh, how do we stop an earthquake or like a tornado? Like, you can't. You just have to let it happen.
I think that's a really good and interesting point, because one of the things that this movie does that's actually kind of different from the other Godzilla movies is that despite all the work that these people put into changing the outcome of events, the events just continue to unfold despite all their best efforts. there are.
It's inevitable. Like, they cannot stop
But
it.
that doesn't
they
make
can
a
say,
satisfying
they're going
movie.
to like the place in Nevada to like eat all the radioactive stuff. Okay, well, we know they're going there. What are we gonna do about it? Not a goddamn thing. You know? And then, like, oh, they're gonna go destroy San Francisco. What are we gonna do about it?
Nothing.
Oh, really, nothing. There's nothing that we can do to end this. And I think, you know, you're looking at these forces that are just beyond like human intervention. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, I think that's why I enjoyed it. Does it make a good movie with character development and stuff? No, but it's a cool take on Godzilla.
But when you're watching a 2.5-hour movie where Godzilla's only in it for 8 minutes, you're wasting my other 2 hours and 20 minutes.
I guess so. I disagree a little bit because I'm also looking at this Godzilla and like, okay, cool. Well, if you look at the time that this Godzilla has perhaps existed, how often is Godzilla even around ever?
That's true.
Like, this Godzilla rises in times of crisis.
Well, yeah,
know?
and
like,
I think the crisis is the key word. Godzilla he doesn't just arise in times of crisis. He also is a crisis. And this entire movie is basically just about a crisis situation. Yeah. And honestly, there's like in that type of crisis, there's nothing that you can do aside from, you know, make your way out of it. Yeah. In the best way
like you
possible.
Almost need the people in the movie just to serve as a way to see what's going on.
It's the platter that Godzilla is served on.
Yeah, I think
kind
of,
yeah.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, let's talk about some geography.
Oh, okay.
No. Let's talk about some geography because that is very important to it being a crisis situation. Okay. Now they have all these people. They have like a million people in San Francisco or whatever the population of San Francisco is at the time, and they're like, oh man, we need to get people out of the city. Let's get them all on buses and stuff. So okay. Now the main couple's kid, he gets on the school bus. Yeah, he gets on the school bus in the marina. School bus. He drives up. Oh, there's a population in San Francisco. It's just under 1 million. It's 837,000. But in like the middle of the day, it might actually be higher than 1 million because of people coming in to work.
For work, yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, regardless, so this little kid gets onto this school bus, and so he gets on the school bus. They're driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, presumably to get to some sort of crisis center or something in the North Bay.
No, they're going to Oakland.
And they're
going to the Coliseum.
Going to Oakland. Why are they? Okay. So.
Because there's no way this fight could spill over into Oakland.
I think what probably happened was you can't have
Not
everybody going over the Bay
Oakland.
Bridge. You can't have everybody going Dumbarton. So you're going to have some people go around. I think that's the only way to get that many people out.
Look, there is the entirety of Northern California just on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. They could have said, "Oh, he's going to Marin." They're going to go up to Sausalito. They're going up to Sears Point to just sit in the middle of the racetrack. It doesn't matter. Or I guess it's called Infineon now. Whatever. It's so stupid. Regardless, they're going up this racetrack where it's a nice, safe location where everybody's fenced in. They don't have to worry about shit. But no, they have to drive all the way up across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Then the Richmond Bridge.
Then to the Richmond Bridge. Then you still have to go through Richmond to get to Oakland. And Oakland is directly on the other side of the city from San Francisco. And there is a bridge directly connecting downtown San Francisco to Oakland.
For all you listeners, all of us have lived in the Bay Area for a large portion of our lives, so that's why we're very passionate about geography of the Bay Area.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm passionate about it. I just would say I'm passionate about continuity. Because, I mean, they could have just said, oh, he went up to Sausalito. That would be completely fine. But they had to specifically say the Oakland's arena,
the
crisis point. Yeah, the Coliseum. Come on. If you're going to do all the research to get like all the buildings, the Transamerica Pyramid, you're getting all the architecture of the Golden Gate Bridge, just accurate and stuff, and then you're like, oh, he's in Oakland. Sense, you guys.
Oh, he's in Oakland, man. He's in Oakland. No
he's in Oakland.
Nothing bad ever happens in Oakland.
The 5 hours to drive around the bay in a time of crisis to get to Oakland when he could have done it in 2 hours.
Okay, let's get back to our criteria. Let's get to the creature design, which I think this is before one of the next movies we talk about. This was up until Shin Godzilla came out, was the largest Godzilla that we had. It was like 100 meters tall. He actually had arms, like full-on arms that he can grab things, do some push-ups. I feel like this was, I think, an amazing design. I think he was terrifying. I think he was large. He looked powerful. he just looked like a wall of muscle going through. I have nothing negative to say.
Very buff Godzilla. Like,
Yeah,
this
he's
Godzilla
ripped.
had been doing pull-ups.
Yeah.
This was a big
Dude,
Godzilla.
he's like CrossFit Godzilla. It's crazy.
Well, no, you know how it's not CrossFit? Because he doesn't talk about it.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
No.
Oh, man. Oh, speaking of talking about things, because this came up when we were watching the 2014 Godzilla together, actually. This movie exists in a weird time warp, secondary timeline parallel to our own, where things like Twitter and any other
And
social
Instagram, all that stuff.
Twitter and Instagram and any other social media simply do not exist, because if there was a giant monster that just busted out of a fucking huge mountain outside of Las Vegas and nobody saw it coming, that's simply not a thing that would happen in our universe. The military's like, oh gee, what's happening over there? And they got to drive over there and open up the vault and stuff. Meanwhile, there would be people in Las Vegas that would be like on their phones and stuff, taking pictures with Instagram and like doing selfies, pointing their cameras at their face with the just gigantic monster in the background and being like, having a good time in Vegas, you guys. You could just literally look on Twitter trends and be like, hashtag Muto, and it'd be right there.
All right, so I think at this point we can get back to I think we've talked these to death at this point for our podcast. I think we need to decide definitively, should the 2014 movie have been made? Should the American franchise be remade?
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Even if I didn't like it very much as a movie, I still think it should have been made just so that the 98 Godzilla wasn't the only American Godzilla.
I agree. I actually prefer the 1998 as a movie. I think it's more
Why?
entertaining. But it is not a Godzilla movie. Like Dustin said, it shouldn't have been called Godzilla. I think you named it Big Fucking Dinosaur.
I mean, it's a great movie. It's just not a Godzilla movie.
So this movie added value. It should have been remade. All right, so I think we finished the American franchise. So let's go to the Japanese one, which of course started with the 1954 Toho classic Godzilla. So it's pretty interesting, me trying to find that online. I actually watched one that, instead of being dubbed, was dubbed with, somebody went through with a text-to-speech thing, so it was like, oh no, Godzilla is here, and it was like all robotic. It was awful, so I ended up just paying for it on Amazon to watch it. So the theme on this one is, basically in a nutshell, what happened is the bombs woke up Godzilla by destroying its aquatic cave.
Yeah, it's underwater habitat. It was the H-bomb tests that they mentioned, right?
So yeah, I mean, it's just the terror of these new weapons, right? Like, mankind creates this bomb, and then nature is going to have something to say about it, right? Like, I think that this Godzilla is still kind of in that vein of a force that has been awakened to kind of, in this instance, not necessarily like equalize or like, repel another threat, but to it's almost like taking revenge on humanity.
Absolutely.
What I kind of get from watching the original Godzilla is that it's not just about like nature taking something back, but it's also almost like, what are the unforeseen consequences of using these terrible weapons?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what I thought was kind of interesting was there's a scene where the wives of all the survivors of the first ship that crashed, they want to tell the world what happened, and the government's like, well, we can't do that, because if we go straight to saying it was bombs, we're going to make a panic. All our citizens are not going to want to work with the United States.
Yeah.
Everything. So it's like, it's not just how do these bombs affect the world, the earth, but also how do we move forward as a people knowing that we have these?
There's also that kind of interesting added wrinkle of, was it Toshiro Mifune, or I never know how to pronounce his name. The main scientist. He was in Seven Samurai. That guy. I'm terrible with names. Shush. Regardless, he's taking an entire other stance, which is that not only should we should probably stop the bombs and shit, but something else we really need to do is study this thing, because it's new and different, and he has that sort of that drive for exploration.
And also is not really affected by radiation, and he wants to study that.
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, that's something that's very relevant, especially post-World War II, especially that soon post-World War II. And with one of the characters actually mentioning, or one of the side characters who was on the train mentioning, she just barely escaped the bombing at Nagasaki.
And now she's got to evacuate again.
Yeah, now she's got to evacuate again. I mean, that was such a huge thing at the time. The fear of radiation, the fear of nuclear war, the fear of nuclear weapons in general. The idea that radiation is this crazy specter, and suddenly there's this thing that actually lives off radiation. Maybe we can learn something from it. That's a great thing, and that's a really interesting theme to get into as well. And a lot like in modern discussions with the scientific community, that sort of part of the discussion kind of gets trampled over.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's another interesting element to it is that throughout this movie, they come to understand what happened and kind of how this is their fault. They have brought this creature upon themselves, and now they have to deal with it. And it's
absolutely
it's an interesting take on the whole nuclear apocalypse. Humanity's created this thing, and now it's out of control, and it's not something you can just you can't close the lid on that box once you open it.
So let's move into character design. I don't think we're gonna have a ton to say. It's the original. It's also 1954. There's parts where it's hand puppets. There's parts where it's a guy in a suit. But surprisingly, I was surprised how well that stood up. How realistic the buildings crumbling looked. The only time it didn't really look good was when Godzilla opened his mouth. But other than that, for 1954, it was amazing.
I mean, it's amazing in to me at least. Well, the charm of it is that when you think about the people that had to craft these sets and this suit and figure out how to do all this stuff, there's just a lot of handmade stuff that people don't do, and it's not really a thing anymore, And
No.
That's actually a really good point. It's not just that people don't do it anymore, it's that at the time people hadn't really done it before.
Exactly.
I mean, sure, there was King Kong from earlier and stuff, but that didn't involve this sort of destruction and such
Of an entire city.
Yeah, of an entire city, and that's actually an astonishing technical achievement, especially given the limitations of the technology at the time and the filming techniques of the time. I mean, yeah, you can certainly see a lot of shots where it's very clear that it's just a guy in a suit because of things like the depth of field or just the way that it moves. But at the same time, wow.
Well, and just the
also
point
keep
of
in
making
mind,
all this stuff, you got to think okay, cool. If we were on that set and we were model builders, we're building this scale model of a city where the ultimate result is that it's going to look really cool when we set it on fire and kick the hell out of it.
Smash it. So I think we agree the design on it's pretty great.
Yeah.
The character design, we got the theme. Let's talk about the human element. I thought it was pretty good. There was a lot of different aspects of it. We had the main scientist who wanted to try to study it and keep it. You had the military who wanted to destroy it. You also had that kind of love triangle thing going on, where the girl has the scientist boyfriend, who's not really a boyfriend, but a guy who is into her, who ultimately provided the destruction for Godzilla, and then the hero. So there was a lot going on in terms of character.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think one of the interesting things about the characters is that most of them don't fall into sort of what you would classify as Western archetypes of what a character would be in a movie. It feels like it comes from Japan. I mean, clearly there's a lot of Western influence, especially in the clothing and the set design and that type of thing. The way that it's filmed and edited feels like a Western film from the time.
Something that I really liked that most other movies don't do. So that main scientist guy was like, I don't feel comfortable testifying on something I haven't studied yet. I need to go.
Yeah.
So then he goes to that island, takes his measurements, and comes back and is like, yeah, this is some crazy ancient being that's come out.
Right.
But the movie doesn't talk down to you at any point. It doesn't treat the audience like they're stupid. It just says, this is what it is, and then we are moving on.
Well, yeah, I mean, you learn stuff at the pace of the characters, I think it works well. I think that as far as the movies we've talked about so far, these are probably the most likable characters.
I agree.
I absolutely agree, especially about the main scientist and his compulsion to go and gather evidence before he makes any sorts of judgments, because I mean he's working with people who just want to make a snap judgment and drop bombs on it or shoot it with something.
The other thing that's really interesting in this one, and it's a huge contrast to the 2016 one, was anytime somebody spoke at one of those like meetings, everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's go do it. You want to go study it? Go do it. In 2016 Shin Godzilla, the bureaucracy gets in the way, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But there's definitely a plot to it. There's every character plays their role in it. Even the wives of the people who died play a big role in deciding how policy is going to be made regarding this. So every person who shows up on screen does play a role. So character development in this was pretty good. Okay, so I think it's time that we start talking about 2016 Shin Godzilla. Now, the thing that's interesting about the Toho Godzilla franchise, or the Japanese franchise, is that it's actually been rebooted several times, but each time they reboot, they always use the 1954 as a starting point. So every Godzilla movie recognizes that a previous Godzilla existed. 2016 Shin Godzilla is the first time it's been a full-on reboot. So in this world, there has never been like a monster or a kaiju attack. So this is the first time they experienced a giant monster. So this is drastically different than any of the other Godzilla movies that came out in Japan. So I think we should talk about the human element first, because it's very interesting how it compares to the 1954. Dustin, you're actually the one who suggested we do Shin Godzilla because of the bureaucracy. So why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think about that?
Oh, man. So, yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest things about this movie is, when this creature when they first find it offshore, they're like, oh no, what the hell is this? And then like from there, it just spirals out of control. And like, I love the way all of these people are just trying to pass the buck. Like no one wants to accept responsibility for this or figure out how to deal with it. And I love like the pace, like how quick it is, how they're just like passing this crisis from like conference room to conference room, agency to agency. Like nobody wants to touch this with a 10-foot pole,
What's really great about it is there was that young politician who's kind of like the main character.
Yeah.
And he's like super angry about it. And at one point his mentor is like, no, that's just how it is. You can't be angry. And he's like, what are you talking about? Let's figure this out. So he has this outburst at one point where he's like, whether we capture it, kill it, or chase it off into the ocean, no matter what, we need more information. So let's gather the information. And then there's a quick shot to like 4 guys, and they're all looking, they're like, who is he talking to? Like, because once again, nobody wants to be the person who's responsible.
They literally say, who are you saying this in reference to?
Right.
Did you have a plan when you said this? Is this directed to me?
Like nobody wants anything to do with it, It's pretty great. I mean, I don't know. I found it to be like funny and also like very realistic.
Yeah.
Like nobody's jumping on this grenade, It sucks.
That's going on. Like that's what's going on with like healthcare right now, with like repealing the Affordable Care Act, and but nobody wants to actually have a plan ready to go.
No, everybody's like, oh, I thought you were going to do it. I thought you were going to deal with this. Like, it's stupid and awesome. Like, I think that like it contrasts really well with like the way they bring Godzilla to shore, right? Like that, like the eel-like creature kind of coming up and like throwing the boats around and stuff. Like, it's paced very well to coincide with all of the people behind these closed doors having these different meetings, and like it's building, like the tension builds in a very like organic way and also very quickly. Like the movie doesn't really dilly-dally around with getting to show you this monster.
It just has a breakneck pace. I mean, right from the very first shot of the movie, it's just like, okay, there is action happening right now, and we're just getting into it. There's Godzilla, you guys.
So one of the things that was interesting with the bureaucracy, they do talk about briefly the 2011 tsunami earthquake trifecta of a disaster, is thinking that could be part of what caused this. And that parallels with us in the United States too. Like we had a bunch of issues with who does what after Hurricane Katrina. Even right now, I mentioned briefly the healthcare issue where it's like, let's just make an action but not come up with a plan. Like the bureaucracy is crazy.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it is kind of like, despite whatever your political leanings or whatever might be, it is like you can approach it from the outside and be like, oh, I mean, there are people who are on sides of this issue, but nobody wants to take responsibility because nobody wants to be the fall guy once everything...
No one wants to have made the wrong call.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to have made the wrong call. And I think that was brilliantly done in Shin Godzilla.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you have so many people fighting each other. You have so many people in one room who are supposed to be working together, but nobody wants to
You
do
know
it.
what I kind of liked is until we had, I don't remember the character's name, but the woman who played an aide to the U.S. president and came to try to back to
Patterson, or
Japan.
she has like an American last name.
She has
I
an
think.
American last name. And she comes in and she's like, look, the United States wants this intel from this scientist who came back, and then we'll help you. She puts her career in jeopardy by getting that extension because the world was just going to bomb Japan if we didn't figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And then
she
she's like-
buys them more time, right?
She buys them more time. That actually puts her career in jeopardy. They're like, you will never be prime minister because you're pulling on all these favors right now. So this woman who has all these great career goals is willing to throw it all on the line to help solve this problem. So I thought that was really great. Then once they finally started working,
these characters are far, far superior to either of the U.S. ones, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we can all
I
agree.
absolutely agree.
so I think we can go past the character point. We all agree that the characters are much better in the Japanese versions of these movies. So let's get into the character design real quick. There's not just one Godzilla. He has three or four forms in this movie.
Oh, I love it so much.
Awesome. Love
It's
everything
so,
about it.
It's so weird and so creepy. Those weird
googly eyes.
those weird googly eyes, and they look kind of milky when they get up close and stuff. Oh, it's just so gross.
And then when he does his atomic breath to like shield his eyes, he has that little like flap that covers it.
the flap covers it,
Amazing.
and then like his jaw expands outwards, and his head just opens up almost like a snake consuming.
And then his
something.
jaw pops open like Predator.
Exactly. Oh, I just love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't mesh with anything that Godzilla has done before, but I really don't think that it should. Because I think it is a great way to set it
That
up.
tail too.
Oh yeah, well that tail. Oh man, it's got some tail on it. But no, I think every single aspect of the creature design for this movie was just phenomenally done. No matter how far it departs from previous iterations of Godzilla, the more traditional ones like the 2014 Godzilla, where it's like, okay, this is clearly Godzilla, but he's been updated, or the kind of cool stuff that looks like a giant dinosaur in the 98 version. It departs pretty far from it, but at the same time, it takes on these weird, like monstrous forms that look like they really are the product of radiation and
just weird. Well, it even sloughs off like radioactive material.
Yeah, it's
like they go into it, right? Where its temperature is like super hot. It's definitely putting out a ton of radiation, and I mean, I think one of the best things that they introduced with this is like, in addition to being like a physical manifestation of like atomic energy, it's evolving. It's as a force of
Rapidly.
nature. It's like evolution given form, and as it changes like throughout the movie, I mean, it is a departure from a traditional looking Godzilla, but I do like the way it approaches something familiar.
Is this Godzilla a Pokemon?
I mean, it might be. It has at least 3 different forms, right?
It had 4. See, it started off as like the eel thing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then it came with the weird body that had just like the back legs.
Oh,
and then it stands up.
Yep.
And so it was kind of like this, like, it stood up on little legs where it used to be flippers, and then it had the form that was completely upright with no arms, and then it had the final Godzilla form with the giant tail.
Yeah, you're right.
Did you guys, at the end of the movie, you notice like the
The
giant
humans
tail
off
is comprised of like
Humanoids.
Godzilla hybrids?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, they're the way I take it is, when they finally defeat Godzilla, like it takes all of these people who couldn't get their act together to work together, hatch a plan, a huge amount of cooperation. And I think if this Godzilla is evolving to survive, like the next step of its evolution would be to form a group of smaller creatures, right? Like to kind of mirror what the people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
In a weird, pretty interesting way. Like nobody's going to stop this thing alone.
Yeah, and I think there's absolutely there's some weird symbolism in there, which I think is really cool to see in like this iteration of Godzilla. There's like really crazy symbolism injected into a lot of scenes that you don't see in the other movies. Like even in the original Godzilla, there is some symbolism, some visual symbolism, and some symbolism in the way that characters react and such. But there isn't as much of a strong visual statement as there is at the end of this one.
And I think what makes it interesting is ultimately that Godzilla was a statue there, and we're teased right away with something more to come.
Well, I mean, it's like the people are going to have to rebuild society around this Godzilla that might wake up. Like they don't really know. Like they know they kind of paused it a little bit, but there's no reason to believe that it's dead. It doesn't seem dead. It seems like in a weird kind of stasis. The other thing too, just to kind of back up a little bit, is as it evolves and you start seeing it, like, we mentioned it separates its jaw for the atomic fire, but like just like the beams coming out of its dorsal spines, like tearing up the planes,
and then
like,
the tail at the end.
Yeah, like this was a great Godzilla. Like if you're trying to watch this movie and identify with this monster, like the destruction it unleashes is unparalleled. Like cleaving buildings, like it's mad.
It destroys like
everyone.
the entire city in like 5 seconds, just moving its head around.
It also does. It looks like it hurts to be this Godzilla. Like it looks like its existence is painful. Like
so that was actually something I was going to mention. The design for this Godzilla actually reminds me of a lot of things that I've seen in, say, like manga and anime and such, like the more adult ones, such as like adult, like
it was grotesque.
Oh yeah, it was very grotesque. It reminded me of the Titans from Attack on Titan. They have this hugely grotesque look about them. You look at them up close; they have exposed muscle and too many teeth, and they're really just grotesque.
Jaws too big.
Yeah, they're just grotesque and disgusting. And this design borrows a lot from that same sort of aesthetic, and it also seems to almost borrow from. There is a lot of Cronenberg in this design. There's that kind of like element of body horror, which I think is awesome in a thing that doesn't actually look like a person or even an animal that we're familiar with. The idea that humanity might be responsible for creating this thing, and this massive monster is an example of body horror, but it's not even a human body horror, is just a crazy awesome addition to that, the general theme of what Godzilla is. It's a visual representation of what, radiation and pollution and all this other stuff can do to a body. And I think that's awesome.
Like along its body, you have like cutaways. You can see it glowing with atomic energy from within, like, I don't know. There's never been a Godzilla like it. And I think it's arguably like the best design for a Godzilla.
I agree. So I think we've hit all the points. So, the way this franchise worked was, in 2004, it ended with Godzilla Final Wars, and they agreed that they would not make a movie for at least 10 years or until the 60th anniversary. So, the 2014 American version was the first one. After that, we're not going to make movies for a while, but this is the first Japanese one since that kind of ban on making the movies for 10 years. Do you guys think that this should have been remade? Did it add value?
100% yes.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Oh my god, yes. This movie, like, of all the Godzilla movies that I've seen a lot of them. Absolutely. Like, if there was a Godzilla movie that should have been made, it's this one, because this is the direction that Godzilla should go for where we are right now.
This is also what I love about this.
Getting ready
is this is a movie that I would never have asked for, and I got. Like, you get a lot of remakes that you don't ask for, like friggin' RoboCop, or like, you know what I mean? Like, they're remaking all these movies that I don't care about, and I don't want them. Godzilla is something that I love, but I feel like is too precious to ask for, and they super delivered, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it is absolutely awesome that they took such a weird, creepy direction with it, because I think that worked absolutely in their favor to separate it from everything that was in the past and give it its own identity.
All right, guys. I think we decided that both franchises should have been remade and rebooted. So I think that's pretty much it for this episode in terms of the review portion. So we're going to talk about some news segments real quick. I've got a couple stories I'd like to talk about. First one is Matt Reeves, director of Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and Cloverfield, just was announced by Warner Brothers to be the director of the solo Batman movie after Ben Affleck dropped out. What do you guys think about that?
I don't care.
I think it's going to be great. Those movies that he made are awesome. They're unique. I never, like you said about the Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla, I didn't ask for a Planet of the Apes movies, but those movies are really, really good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with that. Like, it's not something where I'm, like, jumping for joy, but at the same time, he's shown himself to be a pretty good director of actors, and that's something that you need in a movie about somebody who's wearing a rubber suit. I mean, you gotta have somebody who's good at directing actors to get good performances.
Especially with actors who aren't looking at anything. He's got that good picture, like that big picture kind of view. We're gonna get this Batman movie no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna happen. You know, like I have gotten to a point with like the DC movies where I have zero expectations. They're just like tragically bad. And I mean, Ben Affleck's Batman has been fine. Like, you know, Batman v Superman was a terrible movie, and it wasn't Ben Affleck's fault that it was a terrible movie. I just kind of think, like, if, you know, DC has these designs on creating a universe in film similar to what Marvel has, they need to stop using Batman altogether. Like, Batman is the big gun. Everybody likes Batman. Like, honestly, I think they would do well to use that character a lot more sparingly.
I agree. They
like, what if every few years you got a Batman instead of every single time they put out a turd of a movie, Batman has to show up and, you know?
Agree. And I'm hoping that Matt Reeves sets that tone.
I mean, Batman's great. He'll probably make a proficient Batman movie. I don't know. I don't expect to enjoy it very much.
So the second thing I wanted to talk about was the Raid remake. Over the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of news coming out for it. So it's going to be an American version of the Raid. It's going to be directed and written by Joe Carnahan, who did the A-Team, The Grey, and he's also working on an Uncharted movie. And it's going to star Frank Grillo, who was in the Purge movies, and he played Crossbones in the last two Captain America movies. This is one I'm not really thinking we need. The Raid is a damn near perfect movie.
Don't want it.
I cannot build up any excitement for it.
And the thing that's weird is they're making them like, it's like these special forces kind of thing. They said they're going to put a bigger emphasis on the brother relationship, but it's not going to be a martial arts movie. And he was saying that it's going to be more like that fight scene in Saving Private Ryan with the knife. So it's going to be brutal, but it's not going to be like skilled combat. Like, I feel like it's going to be more gunplay. And I think it takes away. So
the original Raid was awesome because it was just like the shittiest day at work you could ever have. Like, dude, it'd be like if you had to go to work and fight everyone that was at your work to the death all day long.
And the idea of having that directed by the guy who directed the A-Team.
I love the A-Team.
I mean, I'm not going to say that the A-Team is a terrible movie, despite it being a terrible movie, but I will say that it just didn't really need to exist.
It didn't.
I just don't think you're not going to recapture it, man.
You're not going to recapture the magic.
Absolutely not.
All right, guys, I think that's episode 1.
All
right, guys, so listeners, this is where you can follow us. Of course, you can check us out on our website at MDXpods.com. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at MDXpods, and Facebook at facebook.com/MDXpods. If you liked what you listened to, you like what you're hearing, please check us out on patreon.com/MDXpods and help us out. Throw us a couple dollars. It'll help us pay for new equipment, pay for our web hosting fees. That's it. You guys got anything you want to plug?
No, I'm gainfully employed, so I'm just doing this for the love of it. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be great to just get some better equipment and, push this a little farther.
All right.
Yeah, I got nothing for you.
Episode 1, done.
Awesome.